All right, so let's go down here. And I just experimented with something. All right. And if you remember in the last chapter, last week's lesson, we talked about this line next to the picture. And I didn't really do any examples because I knew I would talk about it this week. And we talked about the vertical align property. And for vertical align, we could do top, middle, or bottom. So I'm going to do vertical align top. And we'll see what happens here to our text. Excuse me. We're going to set this on the image tag. Try to keep my head screwed on straight here. All right. And you can see that it puts this line of text aligned with the top of the picture. If I did middle, it gets aligned with the middle of the picture. However, that looks pretty silly. We have one line of text, and then everything else at the end of this line wraps down underneath. Okay. So a lot of times people see that vertical align and think that it's going to make the text wrap around the image. And it doesn't really do that. The vertical align property makes the text, the first line of text, go to the top, middle, or bottom, and it's bottom by default if you don't specify anything for an image. But it doesn't actually make the words wrap. So we're going to look at making things wrap and making things do something called floating. All right. So what I'm going to do here to my image, instead of vertical align middle, I'm going to try something. I'm going to use this keyword float. And the keyword float lets us align anything that's in a box. Now, what's in a box? The answer to that is everything is in a box. As I told you before, remember we have an imaginary box around everything. Around our paragraphs, around our pictures, around our headings. We've been working with this heading 1, playing with its box, with its border, its padding, and its margin. Now we're going to be working with the image. And an image has a box around it with padding, borders, and margin as well. But we're going to tell this image to float, and we're going to tell it where we want it to float. Now let's look back here first. My image is the first thing in my paragraph right now. So let's do a float, and we're going to say left. I'll save it and come over here and refresh, and now look what happens. Now my image floats to the left and everything else goes out to the right of it. If I narrow my browser, you can see it will wrap around the image, and that's the effect a lot of people are trying to get with vertical align, especially when they're new to this. They're trying to get that text to wrap around their image or some other object, and it doesn't quite work. Now, this doesn't look too good because look at the text. It's right up against the edge of our image. So what can we do? Well, let's put some space in here. What do we adjust white space with? We can adjust it with margin. Let's do 10 pixels. See what it looks like. Go over here and refresh. Now I got a little space between my image. I put a little margin between my image and that paragraph that's going around it now because it's floating. You can see as my page changes, even the heading that comes down below starts floating up. We don't always want that. We'll learn how to take care of that later. Okay. So what about if I float right? I'll save it. And now our image, even though technically my image is right here before that L, if you look at my code, here's my image right before the lorem ipsum starts. Okay. But I told it to float right, so it floated to the right side of the page. Now we're going to use this to make columns on our page later. It's a very handy tool. And we can also do course, the third option between left and right is none, which takes it back to the default. So we kind of like to make things float. Makes our pages look nice. All right, so we floated it to the left. We put some margin all the way around it. Let's make our paragraphs look a little nicer too. Oops. Paragraph. Let's put 10 pixels of margin around those two. Actually, let's do 20. And we'll change that to 20 as well. All right. Now I kind of need the same thing with my H3s. I'm going to use the same margins for my H3s as I did for my H1s. Except I'm not going to do, oh, I'll use the same padding too. But I'm not going to do a border around those. Let's take a look at this. Oh, that's indented too far. Let's do, we did margin and padding. Let's get rid of the padding. And let's get rid of, just do 20 pixels all the way around for the H3s. I like that. That starts to look a little bit better. So we got a little space here around our paragraphs, a little space to the right, our image floating left. It's starting to look like a pretty nice page. So what about this issue back here? When I change the width of my browser, and actually it was when I made it wide, wasn't it? So let's make this wide. Okay. Now, when I made it wide, my next heading creeped up here too, and I may not want that. So there's something we can do. We can clear past an element. And the way we do that, let's do that for a pair. Let's do it for our heading 3s. Let's try this. Clear left. All right. So I told my H3s to clear anything that was floating on the left. And now, no matter how wide I make this page, right, this is not going to clear. This is not going to come up and float to the right of my Kraken, which is floating to the left. Okay, so that's one thing people often mess up on clear, is that clear gets applied to the element that you want to get past the element that's floating. So my image is floating. This H3 is cleared past it. Right? I don't want to apply clear to the image. The image gets the float. The thing that we want to come after the image gets the clear. So I can clear left. I can clear right. If there was something floating on the right and I wanted to make sure I cleared it, I can clear right. I can also clear both. That way, if we have more than one thing floating, it will clear both of those. And I forgot my semicolon, which is the problem we have now. There we go. So that would clear an element that's floating on the left or an element that was floating on the right. I think we'll stop there for now, and we'll start talking about some background properties in the next video.